Most people can tell the difference between things that are alive and things that are not alive without even really thinking. But what is life? I mean, we're basically made out of the same stuff as everything else. Despite how easy it is to recognize, there isn't really a straightforward definition. We can go through and sort out the things that life has that non-life doesn't. Things like growth, growing in all its parts, not just expanding. Metabolism, using energy and matter to do that growth. And reproduction, making copies of itself. Overall, life can be described as objects that have self-sustaining properties. And that's kind of like saying a banana isn't yellow, it just has yellow properties. I mean, it's true, but let's look closer. All life is made up of cells, and work from DNA to manage cell functions and produce new cells. But cells are small, so small that there's not really any thought or feeling at this level, at least not in a way that we can relate to. We experience, have consciousness, and maybe free will because we have brains and form memories. If you take away certain things like our memory, really we stop experiencing consciousness. This woman was given anesthesia for surgery. Her brain is still active and she's still awake, but she's in a state of induced amnesia. To her, it just feels like being knocked out and going to sleep. It's used when patients need to be a little bit responsive, although losing parts of your brain can make you a little useless.
That's your little man there? Excellent.
Things without brains, things like cells and plants, they can sense and react, but they probably don't experience. At least not any more than, say, a chemical reaction. If there is experience to be had. Let's try looking at life as just a series of chemical reactions. This reaction makes carbon dioxide from baking soda and vinegar, but then it mostly just stops. The difference is that, with life, each reaction leads to another and eventually results in a copy of the original that can go through it all again. In this way, it's sort of like the water cycle. While it's an open system without any chemical changes, water absorbs sunlight, changes states, moves around, and eventually ends up back where it was, where it's set up to do it again. It's not thinking, that's just how it behaves when energy is added. Similar to life, when cells are allowed access to certain forms of energy and certain atoms and molecules as nutrients, they'll go through a series of reactions that produce another of itself. Really, that's the process of life. Copying DNA, making all the things needed to copy DNA, and then copying DNA again. It's a series of reactions caught in a loop. So life reactions can really only do one of two things, either stop or continue. If the individual is bad at gathering nutrients, reproducing, basically doing life, it might not get what it needs to reproduce, be outcompeted and die, basically ending that line of reactions. And if it doesn't die, it goes on. The replication of DNA doesn't always result in an exact copy, so the new individual can be different and behave differently. Evolution is really just the incidental changing of DNA. Everything from cilia to multicellular organisms, to sexual reproduction, to wings, to brains, came about from changes in the DNA sequence. These are all just traits that happen to continue to work at reproducing DNA. So, what is life? Life could just be the cycle of reactions that surround and proliferate DNA, and maybe RNA and other similar molecules. There's no meaning or objective aside from the fundamental physical properties of the atoms to interact the way they do, the same way vinegar and baking soda interact the way they do. At least on a small scale. If you, like me, have a brain and can experience, there's all sorts of neat stuff you can do. Nobody really knows how life began or in what form, but it's probably as predictable and repeatable as any other chemical interaction. To protect people from each other. If there was no law or no police, I could go over to Bill's place, do away with him, then take his house and all his stuff. And I would do it, because it would be way easier than making my own house. But if that were the case, then everyone would carry weapons and travel in gangs.